Alright guys, it's TouchCrab back again today. Hope you're all enjoying your Wednesday. Today, a couple of topics to discuss. Wanted to follow up from yesterday as well, but also mainly talk about the power rankings that have come out from ESPN over the past weekend and how they rank up. Of course, every team has played 2 matches over the course of the last weekend. Some teams we expected to be really good didn't necessarily perform. Some teams, like the Paris Legion for example, we weren't expecting to put up too much of a fight, but they won both their series in a very reasonable, very impressive fashion on the whole. That's the topic of discussion for today. Thoughts down below as always from you guys, I'd greatly appreciate it. Like as well if you guys enjoy the video, smashing the like button. The YouTube algorithm loves it. Subscribe if you're new, as always, getting very close for 17,000 subscribers. Also, let's get into it then. First of all, Modern Warfare Infinity Ward announced a patch yesterday, and I kind of like what they did with this patch. So the MP5 and the M4 have been nerfed. This is the details of it. Exclusive Ace made a video on it, which I will leave linked down below if you guys want to check this out in greater detail. But on the balance of the video, this individual Slow Kind-Heartedness 3 mentions that this is effectively what's happened. So some changes have been made. I don't think these will alter the meta right now at all. It's possible that this M13 may come into the meta. I saw Parasite had a class ready to go on it. Personally, I don't think yet the meta will be altered in competitive play, but this is a step in a direction of potentially a meta-altering situation. So, the MP5, it gets a headshot nerf, and so does the M4, but those aren't relevant for CDL now that they've reduced the headshot multiplier down to the same as the torso multiplier. So some SMGs actually do more damage in this game to the torso than they do lower down in the body, which kind of makes sense, I guess, in a way. Realism, baby. But the headshots no longer do better, higher damage in the CDL competitive game mode. So those nerfs are not relevant for the CDL. However, the 10mm rounds, which is what pretty much all the pros use on their MP5, they have been nerfed. The 3-shot kill range is the same. However, the 4-shot kill range has been reduced slightly. It's really not a big deal. This isn't going to change the situation of the MP5 being in the meta. The MP7 won't come back into the meta quite yet, I would imagine. But if they go in a similar direction here and keep nerfing the MP5, it's possible that won't happen. And I think, to be honest, they've done a good job on very incremental changes these are, especially for the competitive side of things. The M4, again, the 4-shot kill range has been nerfed slightly. It's probably slightly more significant than the MP5, but still, given that the M4 has a higher fire rate than the Kilo, which is maybe its closest competitor in terms of that role, the M4 is still going to be used, I would imagine. But the M13 has a really high fire rate in this game, and its recoil just got buffed significantly, so it may be a lot better to use now. And I think maybe in the respawns especially, it's got some really nice time to kill and can be a very forgiving gun as well at times, whereas the M4 can kick about all over the place kind of. The M13 does seem to be kind of a nice alternative that you guys maybe should try out if you guys are playing GBs and the like. So yeah, those are the updates I wanted to talk about then. Then I wanted to go into this. So yesterday, of course, we talked about Aches bringing to light the schedule of the CDL for the upcoming season and noting that Chicago and Atlanta FaZe are not playing each other in any group matches in the upcoming season. What we talked about yesterday, and a lot of you guys agreeing, some interesting discussion in the comments, talking about how Aches is probably onto something here, and the fact that they're not matching up in groups and they're the only 2 teams not to do so seems like something is amiss, and seems like Activision is doing it for the benefit of viewership in a way, to try and get them to match up not in groups, so they guarantee in a way, like giving the best possible chance that they get out of the groups into the bracket play and can then match up on the championship Sunday. That was what Aches imagined was going on. I think there may well have been some truth to that. So they've come out and said, look, this is a mistake we made. The interesting part of it is, let's just have a look at the statement they come out with then. So yesterday on January 25th, the community discovered an issue on our league website and in broadcast graphics where the schedule was not being displayed correctly. We have now updated the website to reflect the correct groups and schedule. Interesting the way they describe this, right? It's just an issue, just not being displayed accurately, copy errors and the like. Now maybe these are just copy errors. I guess I'm kind of inclined towards, I guess they got found out, I guess is what some people are thinking, that, Aches figured out what's going on here, now we're making the correction. So I'd be intrigued to hear what you guys think as well. So these are the 2 changes that they made. The Chicago home series, Dallas versus OGLA is in Group B, not Group A. London versus Atlanta is in Group A, not Group B. Now, this is a correction which, could have been an honest mistake from them initially. At the same time, they could just have thought, how do we rescue this and make it look like we haven't rigged the league? Let's just swap Group A and Group B and that'll be easy. But, who knows which side of that is correct. And then Toronto home series, Toronto versus LAG was incorrect. It should have been Toronto versus OGLA, which is what happens here. So this is opposite to the Toronto thing, they got things mixed up basically and put OGLA here instead of LAG, which definitely is an understandable mistake, whereas this one is more interesting, I guess, at Chicago, where now they've swapped around the groups of a couple of these matches, this one and this one, for example, Royal Ravens versus FaZe, Empire versus OGLA, to the point where now FaZe and Huntsman are in the same group. So in theory, if come Chicago, which is it's maybe the 5th event or something of the season, FaZe versus Huntsman could potentially happen. If Huntsman beat Subliners, if FaZe beat the Royal Ravens, then they will match up to make it out of the groups, and whoever wins that, potentially they could be, you know, it depends. This is a really stacked tournament with Empire here as well, and OGLA, who knows how good they'll be at the time, Royal Ravens as well. So definitely some spicy stuff going on here, but it does now mean that Atlanta and Chicago are going to be in the same group at one point, that they still may not match up depending on, say, Royal Ravens beat FaZe or something like that, and Chicago go out of the group 2-0, then they might not even match up in pools. But at least now that is a possibility. Just interesting that this has happened within a day. Impressive responsiveness though from the CDL, like not just leaving it and saying, yeah, okay, fair enough, we have legitimately made a mistake or we need to make this correction, and they've come out and said, fair enough, like this is not the responsivity we see from Infinity War. But Activision and the CDL doing a great job of the transparency here. And now this is solved, we don't have to talk about it anymore. But good definitely to bring these kind of things to light. So this is what we talked about yesterday, how Atlanta and Chicago were not matching up at all in groups, whereas all these other numbers, represent teams that are indeed matching up in groups. Now they will have a 1, like this one in these boxes indeed. So, because they're not matching up in the first round, but they will be matching up in the same group potentially. These are the power rankings then. So this weekend, we had a lot of good results. Like Atlanta, FaZe and Huntsman, I think are probably the clear 1 and 2. But going into the weekend, we really didn't know where to put people. Paris Legion were often coming up 12th. LAG were sitting around 11th, something like that. Then you had the Florida Mutineers were not too far above that. And some other teams, especially the Ultra, that people weren't expecting much out of. The weekend power rankings has changed up so much. Now, Atlanta FaZe is still number 1, kind of as expected. Empire, however, losing both their matches to the Huntsman and to Atlanta FaZe, now sit in 5th, which is interesting. You may think they should be lower down, but then again, the 2 teams they lost to are the best 2 teams, so I can imagine sitting them in 5th around that kind of position honestly does make quite a lot of sense. Rocker sitting at 3rd is interesting. Like, they showed some great promise. They put on some, good performances, but I didn't think they put on anything particularly spectacular. They beat some teams which I would imagine they would have been better than anyway, but maybe they're just 3rd because there really isn't any other team that you could, guaranteed say that's better than them right now, even though I don't necessarily think that they will be the 3rd best team in the league, but, I guess they're there because there's no other team that's proved to be better than them, which is fair enough. They did go 2-0 on the weekend. Another team that went 2-0, of course, Paris Legion beating OpTic Gaming LA 3-2, which is a close fought affair, but then they beat the Royal Ravens in a 3-0 sweep. London really should have won the Search and Destroy and got back in the series, but didn't happen. Paris took it in a very impressive 3-0 fashion, so they sit in 4th here. The Empire just behind them, of course. A lot expected out of this team, just didn't perform on the weekend. Then again, they may well have had much better results if they hadn't played the 2 best teams in the game. Los Angeles Guerrillas sitting at 6, like, interesting situation. I will go into detail in the coming days or whenever I get round to it, really, talking about the forfeit situation with the Guerrillas in some depth and, exactly what happened there, because arguably they could have been 2-0 on the weekend. They did win one series, the other one, they were, in theory, they were up 2-0, they won the Search and Destroy, but got forfeited for something very interesting. So, they sit in 6th right now, which is kind of fair. Royal Ravens in 7th. I don't know if this is kind of too high, but they did show some good form against the Subliners, but got smoked by Paris Legion, to be honest. Toronto Ultra around 8th. Like, this kind of makes sense. Surprised the Mutineers are in 9th because I thought they did they had a decent showing, but then again, a lot of teams putting up decent performances. Seattle Surge seemed decent in the respawns, but their Search and Destroy really let them down, so I can understand them in 10th. Subliners were probably the poorest performance on the weekend, to be honest. They got pretty much smoked, but then again, they got smoked by Royal Ravens, and then they got smoked by Atlanta FaZe. So how much can you read into that? Difficult necessarily to say. They did win a map off FaZe, so to their credit, that is an impressive performance, but still, I'm not sure that deserves being, and then again, they're 11th, so they're not good whichever way you look at this. And then OpTic Gaming down in 12th. Would you believe it? Coming into the season, I thought that OpTic Gaming was probably going to be a top 3 team in terms of rosters. Of course, we didn't see it this weekend. They lose to Paris Legion, and the other team they lost to the Huntsman, of course. And that was pretty comfortable. They lost to the Huntsman. They did show some promise. It's just a thing going forward in the season. We're going to have to see a lot more out of OpTic Gaming, Los Angeles, and right now, Los Angeles Guerrillas are, I guess, showing OpTic who's boss. Then again, this is the first weekend. Everyone played two series wasn't the biggest deal, right? And we're probably going to have some changes to the game. We've had this M4 and MP5 now, if we've talked about today. If there are more of those coming forwards, then maybe OpTic could move up the rankings. What do you guys think of this? Do you think this is kind of fair, or would you rank things in a different way? And this is what Embry Bevel says at TJ Halley. OpTic Gaming number 12, season record 0-2, week 1 record, not to be determined quite yet. If that doesn't tell you the game needs an update, then I don't know what will. So intriguing to see. Of course, Slasher this weekend had like a 0.88 KD, which is something that you don't see out of Slasher, right? He's always the guy that's at least putting up a 1.1, and not only putting his team on the back in terms of the leadership figure, but also putting in an absolute clinic in the map with the assault rifle in hand. Doesn't have a great performance this weekend by any means. The best performer was probably maybe Dashy, just about. Then Kenny probably slightly behind. Yes, it's only 2 series, but still, for Slasher to have a KD in the 0.8 region, that's pretty unheard of. So intriguing that he then comes out and says, the game's at fault for this. Interesting dynamic for him to say that. I wouldn't say that that's really a defendable position, given you look at Atlanta FaZe and they are cracked out of their mind. You watch Simp play, like you think the game's slow paced, then you go watch Simp play and you see how it's really done. And I guess Slasher may be expecting some changes to happen to the game, but they're not happening right now. And if you can't adapt and you can't get up to the same level as some of these top tier teams, you're going to struggle this year. And it really does seem like Atlanta FaZe are playing a different game to the rest of the guys. It doesn't. Maybe it is a traditional boots on the ground game in a way, but maybe it doesn't play in quite the same way. So it's going to be very intriguing to see going forwards. The attitude of, the game is broken, something needs to be done about it to improve, is never a real good one, because then it puts you in the mindset of, well, it's not fully my fault for my performances. Whereas, sometimes things aren't your fault, but the reaction to them is always your responsibility. So keep that in mind. Philosophy with Tactical Rab. And yeah, just to finish off then here, this is something that I guess should have been considered a staple really anyway, but it has been announced that Activision Blizzard are exploring ways to offer in-game rewards to fans who watch Call of Duty League broadcasts on YouTube. So we'll talk about it in coming days, the YouTube exclusivity and how much impact that could have on Call of Duty, and whether it's going to be a positive thing or a negative thing. We'll have to see, and how it turns out over coming years. But this is something that you would expect to be in the game anyway. Counter-Strike has definitely benefited significantly of having drops in game if you are watching the major. Something like this would be great. You watch the game, you get COD points. That's going to get so many more people into the game. That seems like something that's so so obvious, right? But just really hasn't been a thing that's been in the game. So if they're exploring ways, you'd have thought this stuff would have already been in place, but exploring is better than nothing, right? If only we could get some sort of transparency from Infinity Ward about when League play is going to arrive. Because Activision seem to be doing a pretty good job on the transparency lately. Infinity Ward, about the competitive side of things, not so much. Still some room to be done. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you did, subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.